Here now with reaction, Louisiana Senator John Kennedy. Senator, thank you so much for joining us. What comes to mind, what comes to the stomach when you think of AOC running for President of the United States of America?
Well, let me address first your question about dark woke. I think the Democrats are trying to appear more manly. Just a thought, but they may want to consider first getting rid of their man purses and their organic broccoli. Dark woke, light woke, mellow yellow woke.
Today, we are going to break down a moment that immediately felt less like a political interview and more like a carefully staged performance. From the very first seconds, the atmosphere feels controlled rather than conversational. Kennedy doesn't appear defensive, cautious, or uncertain in any way. He looks settled, almost amused, like someone who knows the ending before the scene even begins. As a third-party observer, it's obvious he didn't walk in hoping to react. He walked in prepared to lead. The setup feels casual on the surface, but the confidence underneath is deliberate and unmistakable. He's not emotionally responding to questions. He's strategically waiting for openings. This opening quietly signals that the conversation will not be balanced or exploratory. Instead, it establishes control, timing, and narrative dominance as the governing forces. The audience senses early that this won't be about policy explanations or nuance. It's about framing, tone, and perception. From the very beginning, Kennedy positions himself not as a guest answering questions, but as the driver.
And that's the Democrats' problem. If you believe the polls, Jason, most Americans believe that Republicans aren't perfect, but they think the other side's crazy. They think that Democrats, like Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez, have chosen to become what my son would call utter nutters. I mean, you think about it. And think about what the Congresswoman stands for.
This is where the shift becomes unmistakable and irreversible. The moment the phrase dark woke enters the conversation, Kennedy doesn't slow down to examine it or define it. He immediately reframes it, which is far more effective. From an outside perspective, this is a calculated strategic move. Rather than debating ideology on its own terms, he reduces it to branding, aesthetics, and performance. By mocking appearance, lifestyle, and presentation, he strips the concept of seriousness before it ever gets footing. This isn't random humor thrown in for laughs. It's deliberate dismissal disguised as wit. He uses cultural shorthand that audiences instantly recognize, making the idea feel shallow and artificial. The laughter here isn't just entertainment, it's disarming. Once an idea becomes laughable, it loses authority. This moment flips the power dynamic entirely. The discussion stops being about Democratic strategy and becomes about credibility and authenticity. By refusing to treat dark woke as meaningful or threatening, Kennedy ensures the audience won't either, effectively neutralizing it without ever debating it directly.
If you're a Democrat in today's Democratic Party, you're not allowed to fire bad employees, to fire bad teachers. You're not allowed to cut wasteful spending. You're not allowed to deport.
Now Kennedy changes gears, and this is where structure replaces jokes. As a third-party observer, you can see him begin to build a narrative framework piece by piece. He starts listing what he claims are the unspoken rules of the modern Democratic Party. And the delivery is intentional. The speed is critical here. He doesn't allow space for reflection, interruption, or rebuttal. Each claim arrives before the last one has time to settle. This creates a sense of overload for the listener. The audience isn't being invited to analyze accuracy. They're being guided to feel accumulation from the outside. This is a classic persuasion technique, volume over verification. By stacking example after example, Kennedy creates the impression of extremism through sheer repetition. Even viewers who might disagree struggle to push back mentally because the pace denies pause. The effect is psychological rather than logical. The argument shifts away from facts and toward emotional saturation, where the quantity of claims itself becomes the message. All right, guys. This is where the escalation fully takes hold and the scope expands dramatically. Kennedy broadens his critique to include law enforcement, education, immigration, and cultural issues all at once. From an external perspective, this widening isn't accidental, it's strategic. He's no longer focusing on individual policy disagreements. He's constructing an identity, a worldview, and a governing philosophy that he wants the audience to see as rigid and extreme. Each new category reinforces the previous ones, creating a sense of ideological lockstep. The repetition of phrases like "you're not allowed" is especially powerful. It reframes the party not as progressive or flexible, but as authoritarian and restrictive. By the end of this section, individual policy details fade almost completely. What remains is a generalized emotional response, fatigue, disbelief, and frustration. Kennedy isn't trying to win a policy debate here. He's trying to leave a lasting impression of chaos and extremity. The audience isn't guided to feel informed, they're guided to feel overwhelmed. And that reaction is intentional.
Legal immigrants. You're not allowed to oppose MS-13. You're not allowed to like cops. You're not allowed to prosecute thieves who steal less than $950. You're not allowed.
This is the pivot point where the spotlight narrows sharply. The focus moves away from the party as a whole and lands squarely on AOC herself. The tone subtly changes, but the intent sharpens. Kennedy adopts what sounds like encouragement, but from a third-person view, it's clearly rhetorical misdirection. By saying he hopes she runs, he reframes her ambition as entertainment rather than leadership. This is a powerful shift. The humor becomes more pointed because it's personal but indirect. He doesn't attack her policies or voting record. Instead, he questions her depth and capacity. That distinction matters. Attacking ideas invites counter-arguments. Attacking capability ends the conversation. The jokes land precisely because they're framed casually, almost as afterthoughts. This makes the critique feel effortless and confident. From an observer's perspective, it's clear what's happening. AOC is no longer framed as a serious political contender, but as content, something to be watched, not followed. That framing alone does significant damage without a single detailed policy critique.
Operations for minors. Or transgender people in women's bathrooms or playing women's sports. You're not allowed to oppose critical race theory in our schools. You're not allowed to.
Phase fully takes over, and the observer begins connecting the dots across the entire exchange. Kennedy's lines are replayed not as arguments to be debated, but as sound bites meant to stick. Each phrase is short, sharp, and easily repeatable. From an outside perspective, this is message discipline executed cleanly. The scratch the surface line works because it's both visual and dismissive at the same time. These moments are not accidental. They're engineered to survive beyond the interview itself and circulate independently online. At this stage, substance becomes secondary to impact. The interview transforms into a highlight reel factory, producing moments designed for clips, headlines, and social media. Humor fully replaces policy discussion, and memorability replaces nuance. The effectiveness lies in simplicity. By this point, the audience remembers how the segment felt rather than what was specifically debated. That emotional residue is how narrative control is maintained long after the interview ends.
Oppose reading porn to grade schoolers. You're not allowed to oppose racial quotas, but you are required to use certain pronouns and to believe that men can breastfeed. Now,
This is the closing maneuver, and it's calculated down to the last line. Kennedy redirects the energy away from culture and back toward Biden and inflation, grounding everything that came before it in everyday economic pain. From a third-person angle, this move anchors the entire segment. Abstract arguments suddenly become tangible. Prices, money, and financial stress are things people experience daily. The lemonade stand joke works because it simplifies blame into an image anyone can instantly understand. It's not just humor. It's a metaphor for incompetence and mismanagement. The segment doesn't end with discussion or balance. It ends with finality. There's no counterweight, no correction, and no soft landing. Just a clean exit on a strong, memorable note. The lasting impression isn't dialogue. It's dominance. If you enjoyed this breakdown, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you in the next video.
I don't think I'm being unfair. This is what Democrats and Congresswoman Ocasio Cortez now believe. And a charitable interpretation for this kind of behavior does not exist. And the American people look at it and
Aftershock phase. The part people often overlook because the talking is stopped, but the impact hasn't. From a third-party perspective, what stands out most is how little resistance Kennedy encountered once he finished his points. There's no attempt to reframe, no pushback, no follow-up challenge that slows the momentum. That absence matters. Silence becomes part of the message. When a segment ends this cleanly, it signals confidence and control. The audience isn't left weighing arguments or waiting for clarification. Instead, they're replaying the final lines in their heads. In media terms, this is dominance through closure. The narrative doesn't need defending because it feels settled. That's how moments like this linger long after the clip ends.
just want to jump out of a moving car. And that's why Democrats are polling right up there with scalp psoriasis. In terms of the Congresswoman,
Shows how humor operates as a weapon rather than decoration. From an external observer's view, Kennedy's tone is crucial. He never sounds angry, agitated, or emotionally charged. He sounds entertained. That calm amusement gives the criticism a sense of confidence and credibility, especially to casual viewers. He's not shouting people into agreement. He's inviting them to laugh along. That lowers defenses. The audience isn't instructed on what to think. They're nudged toward agreement through posture, pacing, and tone. This is persuasion without pressure. It's subtle, and that's why it works. In modern political media, calm mockery often lands harder than outrage.
I encourage her to run. I hope she does run. I understand. I listened to her speech. I understand her slogan is going to be change begins with a mustard seed, which I think is interesting. I guess if Governor Pritzker runs, his slogan will be, "You can have a tummy and still be yummy." I don't know. I just think with the Congresswoman, if you...
This segment highlights a bigger reality about political communication today. As a third-party analyst, you'll notice how few hard statistics or detailed policy explanations are actually used. And yet, the message lands with force. Why? Because narrative beats data in this format. Kennedy turns complex political disagreements into simple stories with clear punchlines. Viewers don't need background knowledge or policy context to follow along. That simplicity makes the message portable. It travels easily across clips, headlines, and social media. Accessibility becomes power. This clip demonstrates how framing can outweigh facts, especially when the goal is reach rather than resolution.
Surface, you get more surface. I don't think she has the intellectual firepower to run a campaign to be president.
This final add-on clip captures the broader implication of moments like this. From an outside perspective, these aren't just interviews. They're testing grounds. Every joke, every metaphor, every pause functions like a trial balloon for future messaging. Kennedy isn't only speaking to the host or reacting to the topic. He's speaking to a much larger audience watching through clips and replays. What matters here isn't policy agreement, it's memory. People remember how this made them feel, amused, validated, or energized. In politics, emotional recall often outlasts factual recall. That's why moments like this echo far beyond the original broadcast.